and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. The first order.
No, you're fine.
All right, the first order of business tonight is a public hearing on the Code of Conduct. We have 30 minutes allotted for this, so anyone who wishes to speak about the Code of Conduct, please come to the microphone and state your name and place of residence. Thank you. We're starting with, oh, okay.
Good evening, everyone. Before we, Dr. Bond will provide us with a brief presentation and show some of the revisions that we made, and he'll explain the committees that were involved. Just quickly, for everyone who's here and who may be watching at home, the one thing that at the Wappinger Central School District, we have not been consistent with providing what needs to happen prior to approving the Code of Conduct, which is a public hearing. Dr. Bond? Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Carry on.
I don't think you need a mic, right?
I need a mic. Yeah, right. Thank you, Superintendent. Carry on. President Kelley, members of the Board of Education and the public. I'm going to be doing a presentation on the proposed 2015-16 Student Code of Conduct.
Dr. Bond. Dr. Bond.
Yeah.
So with due respect, you step over here so I can look.
What are you saying?
I want to see the. I want to see the.
Yeah, I got it. As soon as we get this thing rolling here.
You can get
So the public. This is a long presentation, so we better get a chair.
Great. Very good. So we'll start off. New York State education law stipulates that all school districts must adopt and enforce a code of conduct for the maintenance and order on school property and in school functions. The code must govern the conduct of students, must be reviewed annually and updated as necessary, taking into consideration the effectiveness of the code and the fairness and consistency of its administration. Student Code of Conduct is viewed as a document that is disciplinary in nature, supports fair and appropriate consequences for inappropriate actions in order to maintain a safe school environment. The code is not meant to be punitive and supports positive behavioral intervention strategies. It is anticipated that the Student Code of Conduct Committee will be meeting during the course of the 2015-16 school year, and that the code will be updated when deemed appropriate and necessary. The process to this point, a committee of 19 individuals that consisted of school faculty, staff, students, parents, and law enforcement and/or safety personnel convened to review the current Student Code of Conduct and discuss potential changes and revisions necessary for the 2015-16 school year. After thorough review, the committee recommends the following Student Code of Conduct to the Board of Education for approval. Once approved, the 2015-16 Student Code of Conduct will be posted on our district website, and a summary of the code will be provided to all students in an age-appropriate version written in plain language prior to the beginning of the school year. So let's begin with some of the revisions or deletions. On page 3, we added the rights of students. We believe that students have the right to be provided with interventions and supports that will enable them to manage and eliminate negative behaviors and to be acknowledged and recognized for positive behaviors and attitudes. Page 4, and I hope that you can read this. Add, the following protocol should be followed regarding student-parent complaints. This is actually taken directly from Board Policy 1400, which states that the intent of this policy is to maintain dialogue among residents, the Board of Education, and the administration, while at the same time safeguarding employees from unfair criticism. The board believes that complaints and grievances by community members are best handled and resolved as close to their origin as possible, and that the staff should be given every opportunity to consider issues and attempt to resolve problems prior to board involvement. Therefore, the proper channeling of complaints will be as follows. Teacher or staff member, then the principal and/or coordinator, then the superintendent of schools or his or her designee, and then finally the Board of Education. Exceptions will be made only when complaints concern board action or board questions. In addition, the board will not act on complaints that have not been explored at the appropriate level. Individual board members will refer complaints to the superintendent. Board members will refrain from expressing any judgment until such complaint is submitted to the entire board. The superintendent shall refer complaints to other members, staff members when appropriate. So that's page 4. Page 5, adding the responsibility of students. Students attend school so that they may develop to their fullest potential. With this in mind, each student is expected to follow all positive behavioral intervention strategy rules and expectations of their school. Page 5, add the role of school personnel. School personnel play an important role in the education of students. In view of this responsibility, school personnel must adhere to and enforce the Pbis rules, norms, and procedures that are established in each school, including the submission of Office of Disciplinary Referrals and the implementation of interviews to support positive student behaviors. In addition, school personnel must know the code of conduct and report violations to the building principal, assistant principal, or acting building principal. And finally, immediately report and refer violent students to the principal and/or the superintendent of schools. Role of parents or guardians. In addition, on page 6, become apprised of the Pbis rules and expectations of their child's school and reinforce these at home. Also to provide up-to-date emergency contact information, change of address, and general contact information to the school office staff. Page 7, another addition, the role of building administrators. As the educational leaders of the school, the principal and his/her assistant set the disciplinary climate for the school, not only for students but for staff as well. Therefore, they must establish and provide support to the school's positive behavioral intervention service strategies team, as well as adhere to and enforce the Pbis rules, norms, and procedures that are established in each school. And also, you'll look at this other edition, and you'll notice that cyberbullying has been added. The Dignity for All Students Act last year also was redone to indicate cyberbullying as also something that needed extensive reporting. So it's address issues of harassment, bullying, cyberbullying, hazing, or any other situation that threatens the emotional or physical health of or safety of a student, school employee, or any person who's lawfully on school property or at a school function. The role of teachers. Every teacher knows that they work every day with this nation's most precious commodity, the future generation. And in view of this responsibility, the teacher must adhere to and enforce the Pbis rules, norms, and procedures that are established in each school building, including the submission of the Office Disciplinary Referrals and the implementation of interventions to support positive student behaviors. Page 8. Added the role of guidance counselors. You'll see there's a common theme here. Adhere to and enforce the Pbis rules, norms, and procedures that are established in each school. District administrators as the educational leaders of the school system, superintendent of schools, and central administrators must adhere to and enforce Pbis rules, norms, and procedures that are. Page 9 and 10. You'll notice that disciplinary consequences, the committee was able to meet on 2 occasions, and as you know, as the superintendent indicated, this needs to be updated every year. Obviously, we needed to get this updated in August to make sure that we had a document ready for September. That does not mean that the work of this committee is ended. It will continue. And moving forward, the committee will be examining, establishing separate categories and consequences based on age. K6, 7-8, and 9-12. Also, Code of Conduct violations with penalty references K through 12. There was also a category added for bus disturbance. Prior to this year, there had not been one. Page 11, add disciplinary measures K-12. Two things. First of all, referral to pupil personnel services. And in the event that there needs to be a bus suspension, it is able to be levied when deemed appropriate by administration. It should note that we have a deletion, which is highlighted in yellow. Consequence number 2 indicates a loss of recess as a penalty. That cannot be done. All right? That is a violation. You cannot take away a student's recess as a disciplinary item. So therefore, the recommendation, again, is to remove the loss of district resource. What happened? Are you telling me I need to move along? Is that what that? Are you giving me the hook?
I thought I could do it.
No, that's okay. Thank you. That's all right. Page 12, again, establishing separate categories, elementary, K6, secondary, 7-12, and again, there was some discussion about going K6, 7-8, and 9-12, establishing 3 separate categories. Page 17, cell phones, big topic, big topic. This was adopted from the cell phone committee that met for a couple of times during the latter end of the spring. And here's the addition, and it's a change from what was in the prior Code of Conduct. Cell phones. Teachers may allow or permit students to utilize cell phones or other electronic devices for educational purposes. At all other times during the school day, cell phones must not be visible and be off, not merely on vibrate. Use of a cell phone for any other use is subject to disciplinary action per the Code of Conduct. Administrators may also prohibit the use of cell phones during extracurricular activities, events, if warranted. Use of cell phones in any manner during the administration of a state or local exam will result in the student's exam being immediately invalidated, and no credit will be awarded for the work, and that's per the New York State Education Department regulations. That's a state statute. We talked about cyberbullying. We added it on page 19. We gave it a definition. Cyberbullying is the repeated and willful attempt to intimidate, harass, or humiliate using social media, cell phone, texting, and emails. Now we're at the summary. In conclusion, the committee believes that the Student Code of Conduct being submitted for approval supports the overall vision and mission of the Wappinger Central School District by providing a framework to promote and foster high expectations for proper student conduct, a safe learning environment that is necessary for the positive social, emotional, and academic development of our students, and is in alignment with the mission, vision, and goals of the Wappinger Central School District's strategic plan. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Any questions? Answer questions.
All right, we're now open for public comments. Again, please come to the microphone and state your name and residence. Thank you. This is just comments related to the Code of Conduct. Other comments will be later.
James Berlinski, Hopewell Junction. It's a failure. Sorry. My son went to elementary school here. He went to junior high. He went to high school. He was bullied by you, teachers. You understand that? He was bullied by the teachers. I was in his classroom during the teacher's day when he was in elementary, and his teacher was calling him names and didn't notice I was behind him. I complained, nothing was done. Okay? He went to junior high, and they were picking on him. He's bigger than most kids his age, okay? He's a soft guy, and he's smart, so they punished him. Everybody was trying to punish him, okay? They're calling him names. We tried to do something, nothing happened. We go to high school, okay? They put him in a group of people in English class, and they said, you get over here, whoever believes in homosexuality, which to my belief is a disease and a sickness, and whoever doesn't believe it, get over here. So we teach the behavior in my home, and we follow God. And they put him over here, and he was by himself. So they made fun of him in the class. And I found out why he was depressed and angry. So I went to the school. Nobody got back to me after I complained what they did to my son. Embarrassment in his school? Is this what you're teaching? Maybe you should put the Bible back in the school, because you people are fair. You understand? My son got out of school and he hates all this stuff. You are turning them against you. I hate to say that. And I'm trying to get him to follow God in the Bible. I'm trying to get him to be a good guy. But what do you do when the teachers are bullying him? What do you do when the servants are the bullies, huh? You don't get punished. Do you get rewarded? Or you get a slap in the hand, 2 days off, and you get a nice vacation? It makes me vomit. From the president all the way down. You understand? And another thing, with your book, with your code of conduct, I was in the military. Code of conduct is for the military. Maybe you should call it behavior, how we can help you. Code of conduct, this is all about punishment. It's not about reward. People think they're in the prison now. You want to put a chip on it too? But the thing I got the most thing about is that the law says you cannot get off the school property. Don't talk to me about cyberbullying. I'll say what I want in my computer. Unless you guys want to pay my bill and come and attack me, come ahead. Because the Lord is with me. I don't agree with you, and you are not my boss. Last thing I looked, I was paying your bill. You're not paying mine. Don't you ever cross that line and come in my house and tell me what I can say, what I can think, and what I can do. And you're wrong. Because this plague that you're pushing into school under the guise of the government code of conduct is the plague. And you are going to be responsible for the endless deaths that come out of this from the children that you are punishing. Because they're watching you and they know that they're not bullying, but you are. They can see the bullying going on and it ain't them. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Happy summer. I think I have more questions about this code of conduct. The cyberbullying. From what I understand from the presentation, which was very good, by the way, thank you, Dr. Buck. Is that during school hours, or would it include off hours as well among students? So I'd like to get some clarification on that, because I know I have seen a lot of it taking place off hours. And regardless how you want to look at it, it's still a school issue because it comes right back into the school the next day. So I think that needs clarification and very serious consideration. The use of cell phones in the classrooms, I think, is a huge mistake. And once it's allowed, it's going to cause a problem. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The cell phones are a problem on a bus. They're a problem anywhere, and they're being abused. And I think it's just going to get worse once they're allowed. I'm completely against it. We all lived without them all this time. We don't need them in the classrooms, and that goes for teachers as well. If the teachers aren't allowed to use them, then the students aren't allowed to use them. If the students see the teachers using them, then why not the students? But I think that is a huge mistake, and I think a kid should open up a book, look at the book, concentrate in the book, write their notes, and that's it. The Pbis, I also want some clarification. If a child has a therapy because of a disability, and it is in direct conflict with the code of conduct, I want to know how that gets addressed. I really, really would like an answer on that, and if I can't get an answer tonight, and I don't look for it tonight, tell me how I can get that answer. Because that, in my home, it's a very serious issue for us. Thank you.
Give them your name and town, so just for the record.
Sorry.
That's okay, thank you.
I want you to come near my house.
Sorry.
Maureen Ryan from East Fishkill.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Cheryl Miggins from Wappingers, and I have just a couple of points that I'd like to bring up. One is that I do disagree with my friend Maureen on one point, and that is the use of cell phones in the classroom, because in the context that I see it written in the proposed changes to the Code of Conduct, I've seen at Wappingers Junior High School some teachers that my daughter had who have very innovative lesson plans that sometimes allow them to bring in their devices for a specific purpose, for a specific lesson, and it is completely controlled. Students are not allowed to have their devices on or in the classroom at any other time, and there have been some very beneficial lessons that have come from it. That aside, the idea of the cell phones being misused, as Ms. Ryan pointed out, any code of conduct is only as good as its implementation. And if you look across the district and talk to students, you can see that things are being interpreted and implemented differently in different buildings. I know at the junior high school, if a student has a cell phone out, if a student has a cell phone on in their pocket and it's vibrating, it's going to be confiscated and it's going to be in the assistant principal's office until the end of the day. However, if you go to some of the other buildings, students are walking around on their phones. I've had students that I've worked with on community activities text me from classrooms about things for projects, and I text back to them immediately. Text me after school, get back to your class. And it's not just the cell phones, it's other things that are interpreted and implemented differently in different buildings. And as far as Pbis goes, I know a lot about positive behavioral intervention. Having a child with autism, we've done a lot of it over the years. We go to therapists who have used it with him. And the way it's being, that's also something that I see being interpreted and implemented differently across the district, even though we had Mr. Vasquez in place this year to help bring it into secondary schools. When I look at some of the elementary schools where it's very, very well implemented, I see students being rewarded for positive behavior, and the individual student rewards get collected on the classroom level, and then they get turned in on the school-wide level, and there is a school-wide incentive that is earned toward the end of the year if all of the goals are met. I know we've just started on the secondary level, but on the secondary level, more what I see going on is instead of any praise and reward for positive behavior, positive community attitude, I'm seeing another layer of rules. Some of them the students see as petty that are coming with sometimes some pretty strict consequences. I'm not seeing a positive reward, I'm only seeing things being taken away and punishments coming in. For example, just anecdotally from students in one school building, now I know in all of the secondary schools, they're trying to increase the flow of traffic in the hallways, asking people to stay to the right like you do in traffic. But I know in one building, students are telling me if they're caught on the other side of the line that's now down the hallway, they're getting some kind of a consequence, whether it's a lunch detention or an after-school detention. And this to me is not Pbis as I've seen it implemented in the past. And I just wanted to make those points. Thank you.
My name is Kevin Westervelt. My son was being bullied by the administration at John Jay High School. All right? My son had surgery in December on his brain. He came back to school and was bullied by the new AP that's there. He's had nothing but problems, and he's had a 504. Okay? I've been trying to get this straightened out since June. They pulled home instructions away from him back in March, and you had nobody implemented in time to fill that need. By the time you got them, one was a lacrosse teacher, one was this. You couldn't meet what his needs were. I had to take care of it on my own, which I don't mind. But when I'm trying to get something straightened out since June, and here we are in August, and I have to leave the city of Poughkeepsie schools where I work to come down here to talk to you people, because when I come here, everybody's too busy or we don't have time. Okay? I'm tired of my son being bullied going in there. He's had a 504 since kindergarten at Gayhead. I've had 3 kids come through the school district here. My one daughter graduated in the top 1% at John Jay. And she said, I'm ashamed to say I went to that school for the way they treat people there. And one is her brother. Okay? I have to get an advocate, I have to get a lawyer to straighten this mess out. Why should I have to do that? You're talking about bullying, you better straighten out your own house. And when I say I want to see surveillance tapes on something, I'm sorry, we only keep them 2 weeks. Excuse me? If I asked for copies of tapes when it happened, you save that. You save that. I know I save it in the school where I work at, if a parent calls up and wants them. Now I have paperwork here that a teacher violated a 504. Nobody has done anything about this. That's bullying. Here's a kid that's never had a problem. I have 2 principals here that had my son. He's never once had a write-up because I'm old school. You have a problem, he answers to me. That's why none of my kids ever disrespect, because if they do, they answer to me. That's the problem. We let these kids run around and do what they want. Let's not bother them. Let's not yell at them. No, you put them in line, because that's what the real world's all about. You're going to send them out there and they're going to get hurt real bad, real fast. I got a daughter that went through Europe for a month. Okay? Let me take any one of these kids that are 18 coming out of high school over to Europe for a month on their own and see how they survive. They won't. They'll get eaten alive. You send them out in the real world. Ms. Carrion, you worked in the district where I am. You take some of these kids and you send them up there. They'll get eaten alive. You've got to prepare them for the real world. Okay? If you have administrators disrespecting them, what are they going to say? Well, I don't care. You got a kid that's never been in trouble once, wants to drop out of school. He's got psychologists and everything else trying to go forward with him. They're blocking all of that. I mean, honestly, my daughter is a teacher for this district, a home instructor. She won't take any kids from John Jay. She'll take them from Van Wyck, Wappinger Junior High, and Roy C. Ketchum. Because they think they're better than everybody else. And like I told Mr. K, you're no better than me. And don't ever police my son again. He just came out of surgery and you're harassing him, telling him you're going to suspend him? You don't even know he was on a 504. You've got administrators here that don't know what they're doing. I got paperwork here. I want to leave it with you. I want you to look at it. Maybe you can find the answers out. Because I sure as hell can't. And I've been calling the school and arguing. You know when I got this paper? Last day of school. I've been asking for it since June. You break these grades down, you see where the teacher made the mistake and violated his 504. And then they want to kick him out of the school and put him in the alternative school. What do you have to say for that? No, he doesn't want to be bothered with it either. Because he had this paper.
That's not what I'm saying, sir. Ms. Pedro, can you grab his papers? Right. I'm just asking you if you can give it to them.
Well, of course I can. Like I said, I'm usually the most easiest person going. But when it comes to my kid, I lose it. Oh, I'm sorry. And I'll be honest with you, I'm like a hemorrhoid. I'll never go away as long as my kid's in this school. And I'll be honest with you, I don't mean any disrespect or if I hurt anybody. But when it comes to my kid's education, you will verify, Dr. Bunkwell, I am all over it. I'm an involved parent when it comes to his education. And if he does something wrong, you don't have to worry about what happens in the school. He has to worry about when he comes home and sees me. Because I get one phone call, it's all over. And my kids know that. I've had, like I said, 3 kids. This is my last one. Want to graduate, top 1%. She has a doctorate in education and administration. And she can't believe what's going on. Karen Lynch heard about what's going on and can't believe it. She's his new advocate. Thank you. She has my phone number because I called earlier. Give me a call anytime. My phone's always on. Sorry if I disrespected anybody.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Good evening, Board of Education, Superintendent, community members, and administrators. My name is Ed Sloshower, Town of East Fishkill. I'd like to thank Dr. Bonk for his presentation and the work that his committee has done. With that being said, let's move on to numerous concerns that I have. Number one is, this is a public hearing. We cram this in behind the board meeting in the middle of the summer when half of the community is on vacation. We post this 4 days ago to notify the community about this policy. Aren't we supposed to notify the community? Minimum of 7 business days for public hearing. This is not a public hearing, okay? You need to follow the policy manual with regards to public hearing and what it's about and what its purpose is. Let's move on to Pbis, which I brought up several times at prior board meetings. So let's share a little information throughout the district. This year, students were introduced to our new Pbis, Positive Behavioral Intervention and Supports Initiative, focusing on our school-wide expectations, being respectful, responsible, and safe in the cafeteria. We had competitions among all grade levels to earn a reward. We also had individual students earn a free breakfast with an employee of that school for being recognized for exhibiting excellent behaviors during lunch. Our next goal will be adding another type of award and rolling that out for our bus expectations. Special thanks goes out to our Pbis members and the students who helped create our videos. I know I'll remember these for years to come, as well as our daily conversations we had about our blank. Parents had to pay for this, as it was put in a yearbook. That's the excitement that went on in that school for the year, that was commented for the kids that were moving on up. I'm beyond myself. Another school will be incorporating these words, which is be respectful, be responsible, be safe, at home, so they can hear the connection. So we're supposed to repeat this at home. As the gentleman before me said, parents discipline their children and teach them proper behavior. The school is there as a secondary reinforcement for the way parents, hopefully, are educating their children at home how to act at home, in school, and in public. Every staff member has blank. When a staff member observes a student or class following these 3 student-wide expectations, the staff member can give the student a card, and for the month of blank, if the class collects 150 of these things, the class will have a PJN movie party. Wow. Let's look at another school. Our goal with Pbis is to improve the school climate and maximize academic achievement. I asked at a prior board meeting, can you supply me with the data from Pbis that's already been established on how it's been working and how positive it's been for all the students? I'd love to see that information. As anybody, as I asked, talk to the students to find out what they're thinking about this program. I mentioned to you at a prior meeting, students are now going into a shell. They're afraid to raise their hand and challenge a teacher on a question because of the ramifications. Thank you, Dr. Bonk, for removing recess as a penalty. Absurd. We're lucky we weren't sued by parents for violating the rights of children. Recess is part of the curriculum. Do people that work in this district not know that? But no. You were bad. No recess for you. You know what? No recess for the whole class. So thankfully, somebody on the committee woke up. Students continue to be encouraged through rewards and incentives when they demonstrate these expected behaviors on a consistent basis. I mentioned this at another prior meeting. Under no circumstances is my child or any child in this district to be treated like a pet and dangled candy for being good in class. Certain schools in this district don't allow candy or cupcakes. But yet teachers are allowed to give out candy as rewards for students who behave. This is absurd. It's not what this program is. Does anyone remember what I said this program was at a prior board meeting? In the late 1980s, this was created to help emotionally and behaviorally challenged children. It was actually a program for teachers. And over the last 25 years, it's become something absurd, in my opinion. Are there some positive things in here? Yeah, there are. Let's share some comments from educators about PBIS. There are many problems with rewards-based systems like PBIS. PBIS was never intended to be a system. When it was first put when it was first put forth back in the late 1980s, it was intended to help instill a set of values that would guide the actions, responses, and priorities of the adults and other people providing services, i.e. teachers. It was a simple introduction to the notion that it's important to focus more on what kids are doing right than what they are doing wrong. The whole 5 positives to 1 negative thing, and most importantly, it was designed to break negative behavioral patterns of the adults who were getting more and more frustrated by the behavior of their students and reacting in an angry manner that virtually always made things worse. Unfortunately, over the years, a few things have happened that have shifted the focus of PBIS onto student behavior. First, in schools, there exists a core group of teachers, staff, who simply do not want to hear that the behavior of teachers has anything to do with the problems that exist. They are completely and utterly unwilling to listen to the idea that if they were to actively change the way they approach students, they might experience positive results. Instead, they choose to believe that all the problems come down to the students themselves, their families, and or lack of administrative support for the old, tougher policies that used to govern student behavior. They see this whole positive behavior support stuff as utter nonsense, and they refuse to integrate it into their way of doing business. The program is undermined before it even starts. I don't know if that is a significant problem in this district or not, but that is one of the root issues of PBIS. Secondly, PBIS is its own worst enemy because it selects the wrong metric by which it measures success. Specifically, it looks at out-of-classroom referrals as an indicator of whether or not the program is having a positive impact. This is absolutely a ridiculous barometer. Many teachers who don't buy into the program know that they're being evaluated on the number of students that they send to the office. So they simply, quote-unquote, go underground and refuse to send anyone down, even when the behavior merits such an action. This skewers the data in a way that it makes it possible to reach meaningful conclusions, and it also leads to an increase in the amount of time lost to behavioral intervention in the classroom because those students are no longer removed when appropriate. A better metric would be academic time lost to behavioral intervention. That would be another discussion entirely. PBIS in and of itself has the potential to do positive things for school staff and most importantly students, but it has to be implemented in a manner that's far more sophisticated than what most schools are doing today. And sadly, most of the schools lack the capacity to implement it in a truly meaningful way. Most of us get upset by the way it's implemented, and parents of kids who don't need a system like this in the first place. We find ourselves, and I'm one of them, upset by the inequity of the reward system. How can my daughters or sons who haven't been in trouble a single time in their entire school career have fewer of those stupid reward bracelets or other rewards than the juvenile delinquents that sit next to them? So, has anybody bothered to ask any students how they feel? Guess what? I did, and here's a response from numerous students in elementary schools. Okay, they're well behaved. They don't receive any rewards or very little recognition. The students that act in an inappropriate behavior, who then are rewarded, receive numerous prizes. So again, let's look at self-esteem and other things that are going on. A child who's well behaved, we push him over to the side. A child that's not properly behaved, we're rewarding him because he said thank you one day. There's something wrong here, okay? And what's wrong is this entire program in the district. I don't know why we initiated this. It was set up from a prior administration, and for some reason, we're continuing with this. We got grant money, so let's continue doing this. I read through most of these pages, and I don't want to repeat Dr. Bonk's presentation. Everything here I highlighted. PBIS. So the code of conduct is based on Pbis. Somehow Pbis is the controlling mechanism of how students should act. Responsibility of students, follow Pbis. Responsibility of student personnel, adhere and enforce Pbis. Pbis uses a framework that all staff to teach appropriate behaviors and maximize the academic engagement and achievement for all students. Show me proof for the last 2 years that this has worked. I'd like to see proof that this has worked. I don't see it. Maybe I'm missing it. And if I'm wrong, everyone here knows that if I'm wrong, I'll be the first person right back at this microphone to tell you I was wrong and you were right. Right now, I think I'm right. Let's go over some other things besides Pbis.
Excuse me, Mr. Slowshower.
I'll wrap it up real quick.
Thank you, because other people will.
I apologize. I'll wrap it up real quick. We brought up cell phones. There's pros and cons on both sides. Ms. Mignitz made a great point. Ms. Ryan made a great point. I think that has to seriously be looked at. But what I have a bigger concern is that where is the faculty administration, quote unquote, code of conduct? If we're going to have students adhere to a policy of conduct, then you know what? Everyone else in this school district needs to do the same thing. I am beside myself as to why faculty members are permitted to walk around with cell phones in their hand, TAs, cell phones in their hand, using them during class. Monkey see, monkey do. What do you think the kids are going to do? What do you think they're going to say? It was mentioned before, we did all pretty well, I think, without cell phones growing up. I would say everyone in this room is pretty successful in their lives, in their careers, and as a family. We didn't have cell phones. Why is a teacher, a TA, a school monitor, a lunch monitor, anyone walking around with a cell phone? And even worse, using it, leaving the class, disappearing, texting. We make rules, it's rules for everybody. It's not selected rules. Dress code. Do we have a dress code, a universal dress code? Kids aren't allowed to wear certain things to school. Why is it okay for teachers and administrators and school monitors and lunch monitors and TAs? Right? No flip-flops for kids. But apparently, everyone else is allowed to wear flip-flops, so what does the kids say? Well, they wore flip-flops to school. I brought some appropriate clothing. I know it's hot, there's no air conditioning in the schools, but you know what? We all sat in 100 degrees. Let's have some appropriate adult attire, okay? Everyone's supposed to be a professional during the day. You wear professional attire. If it's hot, there is professional, quote-unquote, summer attire that you wear. Spaghetti shirts, shorts, t-shirts, sandals is not setting a good example for our children. So we should have a universal policy. I have one last thing, and I apologize for taking up a little bit more time. And I read through this, and maybe I can get a clarification tonight or at another time. The referrals for the students. I read somewhere, and please correct me if I'm wrong, a student has to have 3 incidences for a referral, but those incidences have to be the same incident on 3 occasions for the referral. So if I decide to slap the student next to me 3 times, I'm going to get written up. But if I slap that student once, yell at the teacher, do something else, and have 5 or 10 other infractions because they're a single incident, but there's 10 of them, there's no referral. I don't get that. I don't understand that. If someone can explain that. We need a set of rules and guidelines, but they have to make sense, ladies and gentlemen. Common sense. Common sense. You're looking at this for the first time on a presentation, and you're going to vote on this tonight? You haven't even heard. How are you going to take into consideration comments from the public tonight or members of the community that are on vacation and have absolutely no idea what's taking place tonight? Not fair. Okay? I understand time constraints and other things. Something as important as this, okay, should not be jammed down everyone's throat 30 days before school opens. And I understand we have a lot on our plate the last 6 months. But you know what? As leadership, It is your responsibility to prioritize what's important. So please consider what I said, what the other parents have to say tonight, in emails and everything else. Okay? You really need to look at Pbis. I asked everyone on this board to do some homework and read up on Pbis. I don't understand how our ethics and code of conduct is driven by Pbis, which was a program designed to help students that have behavioral problems. Okay? This is not a program for the general, quote-unquote, population. There's some nuances of it that can help general education students. Yes, it is. But this nonsense of hands down, don't talk, level 2, I've witnessed this. This is just incomprehensible to me. This is not the direction that we need to be going in. And we're spending way too much time on this nonsense. And where are we having public hearings on the actual curriculum and education of our children? When are we talking about what's going on? That's the important thing. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi there. Sorry. I just want to touch base on something that Ed kind of brought up. And something I was personally involved in at the end of the school year, which went horrifically bad the last month.
Okay. Excuse me, Mrs. Ryan. I hate to cut you off, but could you keep it to maybe 3 sentences because we're way over the time for public comments.
Will do.
Thank you very much.
All right. Long and short, because of our personal going-ons, I have to tell you there's a nasty conflict between special ed students and school administration. It can't work both ways. I really think that needs to be really discussed and researched, because the only one that's paying the price is the kid. Administration has to do their thing, Board of Ed has to do their thing, and it's a total conflict, and it's an ugly situation. So I really want that researched further too. That can't be rushed. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. How many other people have something to say? Okay, could you try to make it brief? Thank you.
How are you? Wendy McNamara, County News Fishkill. First of all, I hope everyone's enjoying their summer. I had written an email to the board today, and I wanted to emphasize the fact that often when you deal with a planning board or a town board where there's things that have to be considered, they will not close the public hearing. They'll simply vote to end it for this session and reopen it at the next. I think in this particular case, in fairness to everyone in the district, I would ask that you do that. What I spoke about is the fact that in the code of conduct, when you change a board policy, you delineate what has been changed in the policy so people can come to a hearing on the policy or comment on it. Every time you've changed a board policy, you always delineate what the changes are, or you cross out, Trustee Lemire knows that, so that people can see what is different, so they don't have to get the old code of conduct and cross-reference it. I think that's really important for the public to comment on, and I think it's really important for you as a board to have in front of you, so you truly understand what the changes are, and you can cross-reference them and make intelligent decisions on something that's 55 pages long. The other piece is because it's so Pbis driven, I think there should be an attachment to it that delineates what Pbis means. Because if you spell out that Pbis, the teachers that follow, the principles of Pbis, the students that follow the principles of Pbis, and when the parents, first day of school, get the litany of paperwork that we get home and have to sign everything, including the code of conduct, if you don't spell out what Pbis means, what it is, and what the actual rules are, if a child is reprimanded or referred, or there's a hearing later in the year, they could turn around and say, well, they didn't tell us what Pbis was. How can you punish my child based on principles that I didn't sign on that? And I think that if the board does do things like this in the interest, doesn't just look at, okay, we have to vote on this tonight, they actually look at it, you're going to find more respect from the public and less conflict, because you'll at least have taken the time to make sure the procedures were right. And I had served on a previous Code of Conduct Committee, and I understand the amount of work that goes into it. I want to thank Dr. Bonk. He did an excellent presentation. He always does.
Thanks, Wendy.
Truly. And also the work that the committee did. It's just that I would implore you at this opportunity to say, you know something? We have a lot, this is good presentation, we have this, we need more, and also you'll give the public, as Mr. Sloshower and various other people mentioned, you'll give the public time if they were away, if for any reason it comes back that enough public notice wasn't given for this hearing, it buys you the time to make sure procedurally you're on point with this. And to me, it would be a great sign that this is a new board, this is a new time, we're all more comfortable in our roles, we understand what happens when we rush things, and we would like to take the time to really have this sink in, because this is very important. There's another piece of this that I want to talk about, and that is at the end of the year when the kids are going to prom, or when the kids have to take driver's ed, the required assemblies the kids and a parent have to attend to understand the importance of drunk driving, to understand the importance of responsibility of driving. I don't know if it can be done for this coming school year, but the code of conduct is really, really important. And right now it's just one more piece in a litany of paperwork that parents get when their kids come home that first day, that has to go back the next day for their kids to go in with. And it's almost like, because it's so key, because it's so important for people to understand what's expected of their kids in the district, at some point I really think there should be the same kind of assembly, or even if whatever it is, required computer program, where you have to go through it before you sign it. Because I would like to say that all of us sit and read every single piece of the code of conduct. I had to because I was on a committee for it, but I don't think that that happens, and I think if people really understand the ramifications of behaviors, and the kids really understand it because they sit down and go through it, I think it's a good step. But I would encourage you to think about that, because I think it's really important. It's something very serious, and I think that if parents had to at least sit through it once every time the kids were in the district, or every time a new one was implemented, or every time the kids changes to a different level of school, maybe that's the way to do it. I think it would be, they might not like having to do it the same way they sometimes don't like going for the driver's thing, but it's really important, because it sets a tone that we care enough about the policies we implement to make sure that everyone understands what they are. The only other thing I would say is that I'm concerned that in dealing with the bullying and with the cyberbullying, enough emphasis is not put on, it's mentioned at least once, but the emotional bullying, because a lot of the cyberbullying is not that the kids are in fear of being physically harmed, it's the kids are in fear of being mocked and ridiculed, and are so afraid they don't want to go to school anymore. And it comes out in absenteeism, it comes out in them not wanting to go to class, not feeling confident to raise their hand and talk because they're afraid the kids are going to talk about them. And because of that, it's almost like I think there need to be other places in it. Whenever it deals with the cyberbullying, it has to deal, in one point it does, but it has to do with the emotional bullying, because a lot of kids think if they don't touch somebody, they can go around and do whatever they want. And some of these kids are kids, butter could melt in their mouths. But when you really see what's going on, it's not like that. So I thank you for your time, and I hope you would consider putting a stay on this to give everyone more time to digest it. But I do appreciate the work that has gone into this, and I think it's important to update the code of conduct whenever new rules are made. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm afraid we have to end this. Thank you. All right.
Any questions?
It's on the agenda, so once the board's like here, it's like the agenda up and discuss.
Can we discuss this or not?
Put everything aside and just put this in place and get that and continue the conversation. It's fine.
All right, we're closing the hearing now, and the first agenda item will be the board discussing the code of conduct, so that will follow right there. All right, does anyone have anything he or she would like to say? Mr. Rubin?
Thank you, and good evening. I listened to the folks. Sorry?
Put it closer to, put it closer.
Well, I've listened to the folks coming to talk tonight about this and their concerns, and I believe that there's a lot of legitimacy to that. I think that I'd like to ask the board at some point to consider postponing this until the next board meeting. Give the public, say, a week to submit comments via email so that we can have them tabulated, if possible, and given to us, and in a timely manner so that we ourselves can digest those comments and then make comments or suggestions at the upcoming board meeting. So I would personally like to see this tabled, if it's possible, logistically, to the next board meeting. Thank you.
Mrs. Hardeman.
Taking into consideration the comments that came from the public, I think that it would be a good idea to lay out a calendar for our coming year so that our Code of Conduct Committee goes into action earlier, and perhaps we can have the public hearing before the end of the school year, and therefore be able to prepare the documents that need to be prepared for the opening of the school year. We really, I congratulate the superintendent on bringing forward this public hearing, which it seems has not been a regular event in the district in the past and is required. So I am happy that we were able to accomplish this year. However, given the logistics and needing to have a code of conduct in place for the opening of the 15-16 school year, I don't know that we have the luxury of time to do a very thorough revision once again on the document that was put forward by the committee and has been seen by board members before tonight as we had it in our possession and were able to review it and submit comments and suggestions for changes that we thought might be necessary. I know also that Dr. Bach in his presentation discussed some things that have also come up that need to be looked at, but will also require some time. So if we look into this as a calendar for the coming year with a plan to have our public hearing for the 16-17 Code of Conduct earlier in the calendar year so that we do give ample time for the public to be involved, I think that would be our best move for going forward. The Code of Conduct is revised every year, so this is not something that happens, once in a decade. It's just that we are now moving to conform with the regulations to have a public hearing.
Mr. Romeo.
This particular packet has been in existence pretty close for 7 years. There's very little revision that has taken place between when I've been on the board and now. Very little revision. We as a board had time to look at this particular document. Some of us have made comments regarding it. So I think, and I think logistically, I have to agree with what Colleen said. This has to be given to the students first day of school, I believe. So to wait until August 24th will not give us time, will not give the district, the superintendent, time to print it, disseminate it. So as far as I'm concerned, I think it has to be done tonight. At the same time, I'd like to agree with many of the things about Pbis, and I don't know if it's time for me to comment on that. I don't believe that we should be rewarding kids for behavior. That to me, that's parents' job. Not my job as a teacher. My job is to teach. And I don't know if there's data out there that really, really, really proves that Pbis works one way or the other. So, but that said, could I make some comments on some of the stuff here or not?
Yeah.
I mean, I have a lot of concerns. This was discussed. Last time this was discussed, I was in Italy, and I Skyped from Italy, and many of the comments that were. Hello? Oh, I guess this works. What the heck is going on here? And many of the comments that I see here is many of the comments that I was opposed to when I was in Italy. And we get the same thing all over again. Bullying is a problem in the school district. It has not been addressed properly, and I think kids get away with murder when it comes to bullying. I don't care what you have, Pbis or anything else. We've had a lot of kids are being bullied. And as far as I'm concerned, some of the punishments that are lashed out to kids relative to bullying, to me, is inappropriate. You know, cheating, you know, I can go on. And for example, if you go to page, please turn to page 10 of, what is it called? Code of Conduct Violation with penalty associated, so forth. Cheating in any school-sponsored academic setting. Referral. If you cheat in any setting, as far as I'm concerned, should be a failure, period. Same thing, I know it goes back. Plagiarism. If you plagiarize, it should be a failure. Board members in the past have plagiarized speeches. Nothing was done. And so I have to agree, sometimes we have rules for kids, but those rules don't apply for for teachers as well as board members. A fight involving the use of with a dangerous weapon, 5-day suspension. If a kid is using a weapon, as far as I'm concerned, should go directly to the superintendent hearing. There should be no suspension. Right to the hearing. Acts which constitute a felony, either a 5-day suspension, 6-day suspension, or what do you call it? Notify law enforcement. Anybody who commits a felony, as far as I'm concerned, should go to right superintendent's hearing. Hazing, extortion, plagiarism, arson. I mean, I could go on. Harassment, intimidation, 3-day suspension. Bullying, first time is a warning. Second time, I mean, it's crazy. If a kid is being bullied on a regular, some of these kids commit suicide because the constant bullying that goes on. When are we going to address that issue and take it serious? I mean, I can go on and on and on, but it seems to me some of these things are very, very, very not appropriate in my opinion. Any kid who brings a weapon in school or sells drugs in school, to me, it should be immediate superintendent hearing. No 5-day suspension. What are we teaching that kid? 5-day suspension next time, then superintendent. Look, there's some actions which I think we, as a board, as a community, we have to start enforcing. And again, Pbis, going back to Pbis, I don't personally, behavior should be taught by parents, not by teachers. And rewarding a kid for a sticker, to me, I'm sorry, it's nonsense.
Thank you.
No, but there's not. I believe that. I honestly believe it. You know, it's to me, my job is to teach my kids at school and at home. That's my job. And I agree with the gentleman who came. I think he left. If my kid came to my school, came home with some referral, that's the last time you get a referral. And I expect my kids to behave and to respect authority, to respect their teachers, to listen to their teachers, to do their homework. Unless that happens, we're never going to improve education. So much said. Sorry.
Mrs. Pelton.
I think what's really important is to understand, if I interpreted your presentation correctly, is that this is considered a live document.
Yes.
This is not something that is ending tonight because of any kind of vote. The vote that's happening tonight, as we've said, we have been privy to the document and have had time to comment on the document, and the changes that have been made and were continually made are things that we are voting on. We're not voting on setting something in stone. Again, it's considered a live document in an ongoing process. The comments from the public, I think, will be tremendously helpful for the committee. The cyberbullying is an issue that has to become part of our code of conduct, and where it extends from there will be something for the committee to continue to work on. With that being said, there's also a lot of discussion about Pbis and what Pbis is. And as I continue to do my research on Pbis, I would like to point out that there is an expectation, a general expectation, that it takes at least 3 years to properly establish Pbis. I think that there are some misconceptions as to the goals of Pbis. It is not meant to be I think it was hands down, don't talk level 2. That's the exact opposite of the research that I have done. It's something that is at the core related to age-appropriate disciplines Absolutely at a high school level, the requirements of what is expected of you and the consequence is extremely different from that of an elementary school student. The focus is on logical consequence, not illogical consequence, which at an elementary, and I'm talking about at an elementary level, having a logical consequence at an elementary level allows someone to examine what behavior they chose, to examine what might have been a better choice, to determine what a proper consequence is in a dialogue that occurs with the student, in a dialogue that may occur with a parent and with an administrator. An illogical consequence would be something like, I didn't do my homework, so I don't get to go to lunch in the cafeteria. They're not related. It's designed to say, when you go to high school, if you don't do your homework, you get a 0. So to take away lunch is not the appropriate fit. So to explain to a child in elementary school, if you don't do your homework, you know, I'm going to give you an opportunity to complete this assignment. It might not get full value because you did not do it in time, but making them aware that when you're in high school, if this happens, you get a 0, and teaching them that is the process. So it's, from the research I've done at this point, which I'm continuing to do, my understanding is it breaks down the disciplinary process by age, and that at the younger age it is focused on really making you aware of what you've done and what a natural consequence would be. With that being said, as far as what we need to get done this evening, again, I am viewing the code of conduct as a live document, and if there's a vote that takes place, it's a vote that's accepting the changes that have been made to this at this point.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wants to speak before we go back to okay? Mrs. Karoff, Mr. Salma, Dr. Riskin, do you have anything to say? Okay, we'll go back again. Okay, Mr. Rubin.
Is this time sensitive? If do we have to work on this now so that this can, vote on this, I should say, tonight, so that this can get processed, printed, out for the students?
I don't think the answer is that it is time sensitive. From my understanding right now and listening to all the comments and understanding that our district clerk, how many hours in advance do we have to give?
The attorney was 72 hours.
72 hours for a public hearing. So what we're hearing here is 12 years, I believe, of maybe just 3 public hearings regarding the code of conduct, where this is the purpose, to have a public hearing so that you can get the input of the community and understand what type of culture and what type of philosophy we want to implement into our school district. So as you mentioned, and many of you mentioned, we're looking at a 50+ page document that now it's really about continuing this conversation and really looking at how we are going to make some serious and major modifications, that looking at it from a time-sensitive perspective.
Well, I mean, how much time do you need to print it and get it out to the schools?
I think based on everything that we're listening to and how this is really going to live as a living document, that it should be printed, and we need to then continue this conversation to really make a revamp of what it is that we're talking about, because we're talking now months of work. And we know that because of a public hearing, and we've heard from parents, and we're now listening to understand what the community is saying to be able to recreate. I don't think, as Mr. Lumiere mentioned as well, that he's been on the board for how many years? 8 years? And 7, okay, you're 8 years. Congratulations. But overall, what you have seen are minor revisions, but in the 8 years that you have been on the board, and we looked for documentation, how many public hearings regarding the code of conduct? You said 1, that you've experienced in your 8th year. So now this is the 2nd one. So that's very telling about what we need to do for this entire document, that it's not 2 weeks down the road but according, I'm what Trustee Hardman said, our Vice President, as well as Trustee Pelton and Trustee Lumia, I am in agreement with them in terms of moving forward and continuing this work.
All right. Mr. Lumia.
Just one last comment. I've been on the board for 8 years, and the cell phones have been a thorn. As a teacher, it was a thorn on my side. Kids, right now we have smart boards in a lot of the classrooms, so I really don't understand why teachers have to use their cell phone. How about kids who don't have cell phones? Then what do they do? It's been a thorn on my side for 8 years. Kids are smart. While you're trying to teach, they're texting. Not to say that's an education. It might be used as educational, but in general, the majority of times it's not used for educational purposes. And as far as I'm concerned, they should be turned off. There should be none. And I think teachers, and that's not only for students, but also for teachers. Teachers should not be using cell phones either, or wherever else works in the building. Use of cell phones, in my opinion, causes a lot of problems in the classroom, in the hallways, in the bathrooms, you name it. As far as I'm concerned, there should be a cell phone policy, which unfortunately boards over rejected because, well, my kid, I want to get hold of my kid. Well, if you want to get hold of your kid, when I was a student, what did they do? Well, I was in the sermons every day. What did they do? When I was a teacher, the parents called the principal sent a note to the classroom, and if it was that important, the kid went out. I don't understand why we have cell phones. Cell phones should not be used in the classroom, period, or in the school buildings. I'm sorry. That's my. I really strong about that.
I have, yes, Dr. Bunk.
Can I clarify that?
Yes,
Absolutely,
please do.
Dr. Bunk.
Thank you, Mr. Loomis.
Anytime.
If we go back to that proposal, can we go back to that PowerPoint? Take a look at the policy on cell phones?
Yeah, so.
I want to be very clear. What you raise is a very, very valid concern. That's why in the code, I'll give you a couple minutes.
What page is that? What page is the cell phone pop? The cell phones.
I want to say it's maybe 17. I don't have it in front of me, but is it page 17? That's just a guess. Is it page 17? If it is, do I get a gold star? It is page 17.
Dr. Bunk, the teacher has to approve it. I agree.
Yeah.
How about the kids who don't have a cell phone? Then what?
Then we need to find an alternate source.
If they got smart boards, they should be using a
It's
smart board.
electronic. It's also it's electronic devices.
They should. Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to clarify, Mr.
I-
Lewis. You bring up a valid point. You do.
I understand what you wrote.
We'll get there. Page 17.
Mr. Bunk, may permit. I understand.
May permit students to utilize cell phones or other electronic devices for educational purposes. That is the caveat.
Well, guess what? My feeling is if that's what happens, everything else is going to happen accordingly.
But that's not the intent of that.
I'm aware what the intent is.
Okay. I just want to be clear on the intent. Thank you.
I just had 3 comments on it. Thank you to the community and the board for your input. I also feel that definitely that teachers need to model proper behavior. So again, dress code, cell phone use, snacking in class should apply to the teacher as much as to any of the students in the class, because that's what we should do as adults, both as a teacher and a mother and a scout leader, board member and all that. If we don't do it, how can we expect the children to do it and expect our words to be considered of any validity at all? So that's very important. Secondly, I also, with the Pbis, I agree, this was set up originally for children who had severe behavioral issues. Many children come to school, fortunately, most of them, by the time they come to kindergarten, their parents and the child themselves do not have that much of a difficulty establishing correct behavior. Reward and punishment should be a transition stage to move toward developing character. I took my dog for obedience training, and the instructor said, you don't train a dog with food. What happens when you don't have the food? You train a dog by building a relationship. And surely we need to treat children this way too, and not reduce it to a reward system. Rewards can be good in the short term to make people aware of how to improve their behavior, but I sincerely hope that the schools are all working toward moving the children to character, because it comes right into the issue of bullying and cyberbullying. A lot of that bullying, and I think if we think back to our own youth, a lot of it, especially going along with what somebody else is doing or not to another child, or not speaking up, is because the penalty, we didn't get rewarded for speaking up for that child. We also got targeted. And character means doing what's right, even when you don't get a reward. We have to develop that in our children. And I would hope that the Pbis implementation does not lose sight of that, because that's the most important thing in character, which I'm sure all the parents and teachers really want to instill in children anyway. And the third thing is, this is a very lengthy document with a lot of big words, and as somebody pointed out, how many people actually read it? I think in our next revision, we have to make every effort to, with still including the correct legal language, to simplify what we're saying so that people find it easier to read and are more likely to actually read it so they know what it is. And possibly we might consider, I know this would be an expense, but getting a translation into Spanish for those families that do not read English that well to be able to follow something like this. Thank you. Mr. Lumia.
Just a couple of words, which first I appreciate Dr. Blank and his committee. There's a couple of words that bother me. I don't know if it bothers the rest of the board, but to consider. Substance abuse. Let me just read the first few lines and then the consequences. Students shall not, on page 14, students shall not possess, transfer, use, sell, or otherwise furnish or be under the influence of an illegal or controlled substance, drug paraphernalia, etc. A student in violation of the policy may be immediately suspended for minimum 5 days with the probability of a superintendent's hearing. How in God's creation can we accept kids selling drugs and give a 5-day suspension with the probability of a superintendent? I think should be a superintendent here immediately. I'm sorry. Same thing goes with the next page. Contrabands, weapons. Again, probability of a long-term suspension. Anybody who brings a weapon in school, what do you mean a 5-day suspension with the probability of a superintendent's hearing? They should go immediately to a superintendent's hearing. That's my feelings. I mean, we have to, look, there's some things which we cannot accept. Selling drugs in the school hurts the students. And drugs is a problem in every school. And we have to address that issue. And if we get somebody selling drugs, don't be a 5-day suspension. He should go, besides notifying the police, superintendent's hearing. That kid should be taken out of the school so you won't sell any more drugs to kids. I'm sorry. But it should not be the probability. That should change to immediate superintendent's hearing. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but that's my feeling.
Dr. Bisbee.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. I agree with John that this Good evening, everyone. I agree with John that about the substance abuse, this is not acceptable and we should take a strict action against this, especially selling drugs. And my second comment is also I'm highly against this use of cellular phone, electronic devices, because it has become an addiction, even for the adults, right, So we should have some policy, and I'm also support that we should not, we know that the intent is always that educational purpose, but it's not happening in this way. And my third thing, my comment also about this Dignity for All Student Act coordinator, and I like this that we should promote a safe, orderly and stimulating school environment, supporting active teaching and learning for all students regardless of actual or perceived race, color, weight, national origin, ethnic group, religion, religious practice, disability, and sexual orientation and gender or sex. So this represents also a cultural diversity, and this is also a very important element. And this is something good that we have added all these points in this. Thank you.
Sorry.
I just have to make a short response to Mr. Lumia in that zero tolerance policies were a big trend towards the beginning of the millennium, and they have been shown not to be successful in that there are always situations, and we've seen them in the news, where you have a 6-year-old that brings in some piece of drug paraphernalia. I've been in a school where a child that was 6 or 7 years old brought in a gun. It wasn't a real one, but it was considered a weapon because it fired these rubber things. These are the situations where you need to have that may in the code so that human discretion can be exercised in situations that are exceptions. I agree with you that if you have a child coming into the high school and selling drugs, yes, immediately superintendent's hearing. But if you code in the code of conduct that any child that possesses, transfers, uses, sells, under the illegal controlled substance, drug paraphernalia, alcoholic beverage, or intoxicant of any kind on school property, as an immediate superintendent's hearing, you're going to have the kid that lives in a home that's not well regulated, that comes to school with a beer in his backpack by accident. I'm talking elementary school. And I've seen all kinds of things where. So you have to leave the language to have some discretion for those exceptional situations. But the fact that it says you're
maybe at the elementary school level, at the high school level, I fail to understand how that we can make exceptions at all. I'm sorry. These are not little kids. They're 15, 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds. They should know better.
Okay, let me give you an example for the
I'm
sake
sure you
of
can give 1,000 examples.
Okay, kid, a friend of one of my kids, nice kid, scout. He grabbed the wrong backpack one morning, and I had his scout knife from a camping trip. And fortunately, he had enough sense. He was very upset, and he went to the assistant principal and said, "What do I do?" And they said, "Okay, that's fine. We understand." And so, it wasn't a disciplinary thing. But these things do happen, and you do need discretion. Yes, Mr. Root.
Well, I'm glad to hear that this is a living document, and that along those lines, I would like to, if we could get, say, quarterly or biannual reports on any proposed changes that have been reviewed on this, I would like that. Excuse me. One of the things I'd ask to be considered when we're talking, as an example here, Mr. Looney, about students shall not possess controlled substances. Well, I have family members that are prescribed controlled substances, so I think there just needs to be tweaking on this type of a thing, that whether or not if a student has a controlled substance and the school is appropriately notified of that type of thing, there's a prescription for it, I think there's tweaking that needs to be done on that, and that's what we're talking about here, a living document that would be looked at and continually updated. Thank you.
Are there any more comments? Yes, Mrs. Felton.
Just briefly, as far as having the word probability, I would like to think that when we hire people in positions of authority, that they have the leadership, and while it might be a very small percentage of the cases, to have the ability to have human discretion, I think is important.
Thank you.
The one thing to clarify also with the 3214, as Trustee Hardiman was mentioning, zero tolerance, that also when you go to a hearing, it's like going into a court appearance. So maybe your first offense and you're going back to school. So the idea of really understanding how these administrators fill out their 3214 requests and how they continue to have a 5-day suspension. A 5-day suspension is the max that you can give, of course you know, but you know that a 3214 without any previous offenses can just be for that student to come right back to class. So it's not about being lenient, it's about also looking at the level of how the punitive measures that will be given, just as in real life, that's how they exist for hearings too.
Just clarify
A superintendent's hearing suspension. A 3214 is a superintendent's hearing suspension.
All right, the next item on the agenda.
So you have to close this hearing now, and you have to close it?
This was an agenda item.
Oh,
This was an agenda item. Then do we vote on the agenda?
It's not part of the consent.
No, it's at the end for vote.
It's not part of the consent
So
agenda.
do we vote on it at the end?
It's a new business item.
Can we just go ahead and vote on it now?
No,
We should leave it in order?
Leave it in order, fine.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you. That's why we have that. That's how we do things. All right. Anything we do wrong is because we didn't listen to her or failed to ask her, Mrs. Taylor. Okay, the communications announcements received by the Board of Education. We had, there was some talk, Mr. Lumia,
That's fine.
All right, fine.
I think you should make it a point for next board meeting so that people know.
Let's reverse those two. Because we didn't know that. Okay, thank you. All right, communications announcements received by the Board of Education. Does anyone have something to share? Mr. Rubin.
Thank you. Just as an external visit to the school, I had the opportunity to visit Gayhead School, Gayhead Elementary School, and I would hope that what I actually looked at was the student drop-off entranceway that still needs to have some action done. I know they said that was going to be done sometime during the summer, but the overhang and the steps there look to me like they still need some additional work. Tomorrow, if anybody is interested in and donate some blood, want to donate some blood, Wappingers Junior High School, I forget the hours, but it's tomorrow afternoon, I believe. The Little Doctors are there having a blood drive. I intend to stop by and say some hello, maybe give them some Little Doctors or nurses hats if I can borrow some from the VA. And also would kind of stop by if I get an opportunity, and if the principal is around, maybe stop by Oak Grove and take a look at the condition of the curtains on their stage at their cafeteria. So, thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Lumia.
Do they take time and blood, number one? Number two, on Wednesday, there's a capital improvement committee meeting at 10 o'clock. You're welcome to come. It's in this office, or in this building, I believe. So you're welcome to come. Capital improvement committee meeting. Thank you.
Anyone else? I had the opportunity, since my grandson signed up for a couple of the summer camp programs in the Wappinger School District, to see some of those programs in action. They're really good, and anyone who knows anyone with who has elementary school age or junior high or senior high students, or is knows other people who are looking for summer activities, they're very worthwhile, and it was excellent instruction. He had a great time and learned a lot. Following up on the committee issue, the audit committee is seeking public members. They need 2 members from the public. Those interested are advised to send a resume to the district clerk, Alberta Pedro, because it's helpful if we get different kinds of expertise. You don't have to send a full resume like you're applying for a job, but if you contact her, she'll let you know what sort of information they'd like. Just related basically to the work of the committee. The Capital Improvement Committee, the Policy and the Public Relations Committees also welcome members from the public, and those who are interested also please contact the district clerk, Alberta Pedro. Last month, the board approved a legislative action committee, and the people who expressed interest on the board were Mrs. Hardeman. No, no more.
I was gonna correct that, because I
Okay.
think that's the one that I Skyped at, and I think that
You
was
just
missed.
Skyped that
All right.
And I'm just looking through the minutes to find that.
Okay, Mr. Laval, Mr. Lumia, and Mr. Soma, and we need a draft charter in order to have for a committee. So, do you think you could? I realize Mrs. Laval isn't here this meeting; she was taken ill. Do you think people could get together and come up with a draft charter by the next board meeting?
I won't even be here.
You won't be here, Mr.
So.
Lumia. Mr. Soma. You'll contact Mrs. Laval. Okay, thank you very much. All right. We have public comment time now on agenda items. If you have an additional thing to comment on other than the code of conduct, which we've already talked about, and it's on the agenda, please keep your comments brief since we're running late, and please state your name and town. Thank you. Is there anyone who has other agenda items they would like to comment on?
I'm timed, so okay. Ed Slowshower again, Town of East Fishkill. First, I kind of got a little heated earlier, so I just wanted to apologize to everybody. I got very emotional when it comes to the kids. That happens. Agenda item 8.06. Hopefully tonight, can we get a quick explanation on the breakdown of the private schools, cost per student, especially the Hillcrest Educational Services, which has a line item of $206,000 for one student. That seems obviously to be a unique situation. And then there's just a couple of other large items there. If we just get a definitive explanation for the community, that would be very helpful. Agenda item 5.01. I'd like to make a suggestion that board members, even if they're stating themselves being community members, not to post any comments on Facebook that were established by district parents. All this seems to do is cause more problems than solving problems. I would just like to recommend just answer your direct emails from the community. I think that might be a better way to handle different topics and different things. Real quick, back on agenda item 10.01. I know you mentioned you had received the information to review. It's Monday. I would think that you got your board packets Thursday or Friday, which only would have given you 3 or 4 days to review the information, unless you were provided prior to this past few days the information with regards to the Code of Conduct packet. And if someone also could just give a definitive answer at some point, if not tonight, but at the next meeting, why are we so engulfed in Pbis as other school districts are not? Why do we seem to be putting so much time, effort, resources, teacher resources, taking teachers out of class to train them? They should be in the classroom with teachers. I just would like to know, why are we so consumed that Pbis seems to be the only direction to go in? With regards to the Legislative Action Committee, which was slightly a missing item, but thank you, Madam President, for bringing up. I did supply Mr. Lumia with some information for the charter if he's going to be out of town. If you could possibly forward that to one of the other committee members, or I would be more than happy to do that to review to help move that process along. I do not see an agenda item that answers the questions that the public has asked from the prior board meetings. I thought that since you voted on this policy to answer questions, that a portion of the meeting would address this. I see nothing. When will this process start? Could we get some clarification? Another missing item on the agenda tonight is Orchard View. This school starts in a little over 4 weeks, with one board meeting for the end of this month. When do you plan on discussing the new charter and voting on the new charter, the regulations, the eligibility requirements, and any disciplinary action for students who violate the charter? Down the hall, the school is under construction, yet no one knows what's going on in the community. You voted to open the school, you hired a principal, but what is the process for parents to enroll their kids? The website has no updated information. We're bringing 9th grade into Orchard View. How are parents supposed to prepare? How are the kids supposed to prepare? How are the teachers supposed to prepare? So again, I know we had a lot on the plate the last several months, but Orchard View, I thought, was something that was an important topic, and you're going to wait till the next board meeting to vote on it possibly, which is a week before school opens, and then what if parents have concerns and issues? I'm a little concerned as to why this is all of a sudden kind of falling off the face of the earth. So I'm hoping that this could come up for discussion, and you can make a decision as to what you're doing with the school and what the school is going to be all about, because no one knows. Thank you.
Hi. With all due respect, I would just like to comment on agenda item 10.03, which is the act, not on the code of conduct itself, but the approval of the code of conduct. As much as I agree that it should be a living document, the document everyone signs off on, they sign off on the first or second day of school. Some of you have very valid points across the board about things you want changed. So it can't be a living document because the kids get it once, the parents get it once, and that's the year. There are attachments that need to be put on delineating what Pbis principles are. It should be delineated what the changes are so everyone understands. I understand the need for expediency, but school actually starts a week later this year. And I would ask that you seriously consider taking the time for these very cogent points that have been made by board members and the community to be put in. It never pays to rush something because as much as it's a living document, they only sign it in September. It doesn't happen again until the next school year. Thank you so much.
Any other comments? All right, the superintendent's report.
I'll be very brief with the superintendent's report. I'd just like to share quickly the work that we have started for our professional development and administrative retreat. Last year we worked on really highlighting collaboration, establishing professional learning communities, and really looking at how to make things great for students in our schools. One of the conversations that I've had with our president of the Board of Education is to really make it a goal or make it an objective from the central office staff team to really provide workshops of what's really happening in our schools, instructionally, what kind of activities are happening in our schools, and really trying to get away from, this is what we're here for. We're here to really provide our students with an optimal education and to do what we can do best as possible. So part of the plan is to really create an agenda for the entire year where topics are going to be highlighted so that we don't push them to the side because of other things that we deem to believe that are pertinent and have nothing to do with what's happening instructionally in our schools and what we should be highlighting in terms of the things that are going on in our schools. As you can see, there's also, I want to share with the board and with the community that our Assistant Superintendent, Darren Wakima, and I would really like to provide a workshop presentation as soon as possible regarding the APPR, the Regents Reform Agenda, and as you know, it's Educational Law 3012C that we have been implementing for the last few years. Starting this school year, we are required to implement Educational Law 3012D. And 3012D has really changed many of the things that we will be required and mandated to do. And it's important to highlight and show the public and share with the board the difference between 3012C and 3012D, as well as where we are and where we stand with the Administrators Union in terms of principals and as well as with our teachers union in terms of maybe having to apply for a hardship waiver. So what you're hearing me say in a very short note is that this is one of the very items that we want to share with the board as soon as possible and create it as a workshop so that we can provide you with the adequate information and you can ask the questions necessary to really try to understand the difference in the Regents Reform Agenda from 3012C to Education Law 3012B. Thank you. Oh, and then one more thing. We will work as we did with the budget, and we will work as we did with the budget, and we will provide a section in our website that will highlight and show questions that are being answered that were asked of the public, and really try to provide those answers as we have when we did with the budget, and we saw how well it worked and how transparent it was to keep the community informed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carrion. Next we have a presentation on the kindergarten through grade 6 report card revision. Mr. Lakima will be presenting.
Thank you, Mr. Carrion, members of the board. I'm just passing out the two copies, one of grade 5 report card example and one of the proposed grade 6 report card. With the change in grade configuration, the question came up rather early on, what do we want to do about a report card for grade 6? In last year, in 2014-15, grade 6 had a traditional report card that was shared by all of the secondaries, 6 through 12, and K-5 had revised the elementary report card, which was K-5. The format of the, actually, is this actually quick? So they can use? Oh, it does. It works. It's good enough. It's good enough. So this past year, last summer, or just prior to last summer, in August of 2012, on August 12th, 2014, the board approved the new K-5 report card, which included information that or grading elements that were aligned to the new curriculum. It was a revision from the previous report card, which had a similar format, which had grading elements that were really prior to Common Core. And so a committee got together that included coordinators, teachers, principals, parents. It was led by Mrs. Warden and co-chaired by the coordinators at the time. And they came up with a standards-based report card that was really whose primary goal was really to inform parents of the progress their children were making towards the key standards at every grade level. And that was really the really main, in addition to what's up there on the board, what the main benefiting factors were. And it really felt natural to make the 6th grade report card line up with that as well. How they how the committee came together, and I'm doing this presentation on behalf of Mrs. Warden, so I apologize if I don't have it all filled in. But the committee came together and they based their exercises around what they call the power standards, which is put out by Doug Reeves and Larry Ainsworth. And the key, again, was just that they had a strategy for how they were going to develop these standards into these grading elements. So this was the first year the report card went through. Surveys were conducted. Overall results seemed positive, according to Mr. Warden. And the committee was then reformed, really with just a core group of teachers and coordinators to think about the grading elements for grade 6 and use the same process for establishing what the grade 6 elementary report card should look like. And that's what you have in front of you. So tonight we're asking you guys to consider the idea of adopting this as being the official grade 6 report card. They met one other recommendation on the grading key at the top. The committee felt that if you look at the grade 5 report card, the committee felt that the parentheses with the numeric grades, those grade ranges, be removed. They thought that it was confusing and that they need to come out. So they're proposing that the grade key just include the 1 through 4 plus or minus, and that the grade ranges be eliminated. That's it. Questions, Jim?
Yeah, I like the grade range. I think 2 years ago, parents were confused about grade range and what the four, what it meant. I think by having that, a 4 plus meets the standard with distinction between 97 on, that tells me something. So I like to keep that. I don't know if it's people feel, oh, we have an elementary school principal, so let's see what she has to say. I'll take your advice.
I agree with removing the percentages because really the proficiency is the level 3, and so then parents whose students score at the level 3 feel that they don't understand why their child didn't get a level 4 when it really requires that extra rigor, that extra level of critical thinking to show the distinction that level 4 encompasses.
Yeah, I think
And
that
so it's not that you expect that your child should get all 4s on their report card. I mean, that's a very rare event when there are numerous 4s on a report card.
Yeah,
Having that 90 to 100% be in the level 4 area really I think confuses.
It's not like
that point.
it's more of an apples and oranges. It's not like the ABC correlates to that numeric grade that you think about. It is about a proficiency level, as Mrs. Hardiman was indicating, and they felt that it is too confusing to have to explain, why a student perhaps didn't get 100, as it would have, related to a 4+ on a particular grading criteria. Given how the grading criteria is based on the descriptors, the proficiency standards is really what they felt was most important, not necessarily the grade ranges. That's basically the feedback I got out of the committee for tonight's presentation.
Were parents on this particular committee?
The original K-5 they were. That's my understanding in the
What did
grade
they-
6.
And what do they feel about having 97 to whatever it is, just giving the ranges?
I wasn't on the committee.
I sat in, as I do walk into many of these meetings and the dialogue that was taking place. The teachers that were participating in the committee were basing all of their information and all their recommendations based on what they had experienced in the classroom with teachers, with parents, in terms of conferencing with parents as well. I think also when we are talking, and this is my own personal assessment of the situation, when we look at the Regents reform agenda and we think about the Common Core standards, and we know that we are mandated and we are required to have the Common Core standards, that and there's all this confusion or what's the word I'm looking for? We don't have a consensus of how we agree to things. So to really split hairs from an 82 to an 84, when in reality the descriptor is the same. It says meet the standards with distinction. If you're on a level 4, you're really meeting the standards with distinction, and you're not splitting those hairs about where you are. Those conversations can happen with parent-teacher conferencing, when teachers call and talk to when parents talk to the teachers. The level of 3, it's a level 3. The 3 minus the 3 plus doesn't really indicate anything else, but if you're on a level 3, you are meeting the standards. You are proficient. So the descriptor right now and what we're talking about and the level of assessments and what assessments we bring in and what's determining all of these things, I'm not sure if that plus and minus signs, as the teachers were sharing with Janet Gordon and the teachers that were in the committee and making these recommendations and felt very strong about it, I would say that I am in agreement with them.
Mr. Lumia.
I think as a teacher, it's harder for them to make a distinction between a 3 minus 3 and 3 plus. There's more work that they've got to do. That perhaps that's the reason why they say they want a numeric number not associated with it. As a parent, thank God I'm no longer, that they're out of school. As a parent, I would rather see the plus, even though they were exceeding expectations of 4. I think there's different levels to 4. And I'd like to see that. Personally, I'd like to see it.
The
As a
plus and
parent.
minus, they talked about that, and they talked, some people wanted to just remove it altogether, but they left it in. That was one of the biggest complaints when we first did this format of the survey a few years ago in the previous iteration, that we came out with just a 1 through 4, and the parent community said, we really want a plus and minus, so that did come back. And I do want to note that our elementary report card is broken into 2 different templates right now, K to 2 and 3 to 5, and on K to 2, there is no percentage range on the grade key. There never was.
Some parents can chime in on it too. I can just say, Ms. Cancerini, who's Janet Warden's secretary, they did survey the parents, and the
Correct.
parents did
Correct.
chime in, and that's
Yes.
another reason why the plus and the minuses were eliminated as well. But we also have our new assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction, and she's going to be leading that department. And just from another perspective, if you would like to hear from her, just quickly in terms of looking at the plus and the minus sign, the percentage, yes.
Yes, good evening, everyone. It's important that when we are looking at the grading systems on report cards, that it is clear and it is consistent. So when we are parents looking at our child's report card, we can easily understand the grade or the rating that our child has received. It's also important that it is consistent as teachers, that we are giving grades that are consistent with the meaning of the report card and what that represented. So when you have the grades 1, 2, 3, or 4, it's very difficult to assign that to numerical grades, because similar to what was mentioned earlier, the 4, where it is exceeding standards or meeting standards with distinction, you do have a high level of academic rigor and a high level of critical thinking and analysis that is involved. And a lot of that does not come from a numerical grade. It comes from going above and beyond that particular work that's at hand. So having a numerical grade could give a misrepresentation of the child's ability, and therefore have a little bit of discrepancy between what is a 3 and what is a 4.
Thank you.
I was wondering, not only as a teacher, as a former teacher, but also as a parent and grandparent, when you get these report cards, I think it's important on the one hand to know whether it's a 1, 2, 3, or 4, since that's the way they're being graded by the state. But for the parents who get papers home that are in percentages, or they look at them and how many were right and how many wrong, and in their heads they figure out the percentages, and then they see the 1, 2, 3, or 4, it's sometimes a little hard for them to figure out why the child has the grade they do. Also, since most of the children will be getting 2s or 3s, I believe, isn't that pretty much the way it goes? They will also be wondering, well, is he doing as well as most of the children in the class? What did Johnny, Mary, Susie, and Tom get? And not really knowing whether their child should be working a little harder, whether their child needs extra help. Maybe a lot of children in the class have 2s. Does that mean you need extra help, or does that mean that just most of the children in the class are expected to get 2s? And so I'm wondering if there's a way of giving more than one grade to them, the state ones, the 1, 2, 3, or 4, and something else a little more precise, which may not correspond with certain percentages to those, but would give them a more closer idea. Not in case 2, because I realize at that age you really don't make those distinctions, but in 3 through 6, is that a possibility?
I think a lot of the feedback or additional information will come from the conversations that the teacher is having with the parent, but also in the comment section that the teacher will be able to fill out to provide additional information to help the parent understand exactly how their child is performing academically. So the comment sections will be helpful, but definitely that parent-teacher conference, which should be ongoing, to let the parent know, keep the parent apprised of the academic performance.
and to add in the three to five grades currently. I don't believe most teachers keep a traditional grade book that would tabulate into an overall average score. I think that was.
Interesting. I would like to say though that I think the format is much clearer, and congratulations on using plain English so that people know exactly what skills the children are good at and keep working on. Thank you. Mr. Rubin?
Thank you. I think this definitely shows a lot of work. My concern, if you will, is looking at this. I could understand 1, 2, 3, or 4 exceeding expectations, working towards expectations. Not meeting expectations are not applicable. But when I go to the grade key and I see 4 minus, 4, and 4 plus, they all say meets the standards with distinction, meets the standards with distinction. Same thing all the way through, except for non-applicable all the way through. That doesn't clarify things for me. And I think some work needs to be done in terms of a clarification on the grade key to show a distinction between a 3, a 3 plus, and a 3 minus. They all meet the standards.
So that grade key was pulled in from the previous report card, and this committee that formed for the K-5 last summer, prior to last summer, which was approved last summer, spoke to that at great length and decided to just leave the grade key in place. It really just goes back to the fact that the core who want to have a descriptor-based report card with the 1 through 4 grading, if you will, scheme, really feel that's the core of it. But the plus or minus was to actually just give a little flexibility to the teachers who want to say that they're almost there or they're just a little bit better than this. But it went back to the original parent survey, back to the original time we deployed the report card, when the original committee came up with the grade key and said, we're going 1 through 4 on this, or an A. And those plus or minus came back as the only thing that the parents wanted to add. It was the only thing that they wanted. And once we put the plus or minus into the grade key and resubmitted the report card survey back out with the new mock-up template, we got no responses back and negative against the grade key.
Right, but it just seems to me that you have to know where the bar is in order to try and reach it. You have 3 different bars here, but the wording is all the same.
Yeah, I think they want to be very careful not to change the wording because it's still, the 4 is still, and look at the wording, it's very specific. It'd be really hard to tweak that into a plus or minus.
All right, we have several people. Mrs. Pendleton?
Just quickly, I have two children in elementary school. It's not working. And I have to say that when they first began, I was accustomed to a percentage, and as they're getting older, I have really grown accustomed to this. And as a parent, not as a board member, but as a parent, when I see a plus and a minus, that's my guide. Because regardless of the number, when I see a plus or a minus, I know if my child is starting to slack a little bit and I can catch it really soon, or I know if he's doing something that's very interesting and he's excelling a little bit. So that plus or minus is more a way for me to make sure that my children are staying on track. Again, that's just my perspective. If I have a number that I expect of them, if it goes up or down, I know what to do as a parent.
Thank you. Dr. Risby?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand one thing. You have this numeric grade also, is that right? 90 to 100% here.
What was the question?
The numeric grade and also this kind of exceeding expectation. Is that right? That was fifth grade.
3 through 5 has this. If this is right.
This is the old one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is the proposed grade 6, where where the percentages and parentheses are not defined.
This would be the same. So the new one is not going to show the numeric grade, is that right?
That was a side addendum request.
Yeah, that's what my question is. That so the new grade is not showing the numeric grade. And I remember that my daughter was in a private school, and when she was when she was selected for this honor society, they said the requirement is numeric grade.
There's a train of thought where there's a school in Vermont that I believe goes K-12 with full descriptor. I mean, it's not. There are I think some people in District Y go to K to 8. You don't.
It's a grade level 5th and 6th grade. There's no honor society.
Okay,
But through high school, there's schools that don't do grades at all.
Right.
Through high school and through college. So, I mean, it just is there's no law that says, or even honor societies, there are honor societies.
They go by the numeric grade, is that right?
That's the high school.
But it also depends on the school that it's housed in.
Okay. Mrs. Corral.
I just have one question about whether you discussed eliminating the minuses and going with two 1s, 2 2s, 2 3s, and 2 4s. Because when I look at it, if you're going to have 3 levels, first of all, it's going to almost encourage everyone to go back to last year's and say, well, now wait a minute, 1 minus was 0 to 62 and 1 is 63 to 66. It almost encourages them to hold on to that mathematical computation. Whereas if you were able to go and just look at it from a 1 and a 1 plus, and then a 2 and a 2 plus, was that ever discussed to simplify it further, to bring about the change that you actually wanted to realize?
Not to my knowledge, no.
No, it was not. It was not, and I sort of misspoke because I was really going for the 1, 2, 3, 4 with no plus or minuses.
Right.
But
I'm just wondering if that might be a transition
I take concern because of the fact also that there are many times when students for specific skill sets and quizzes that they take, they may get really high scores. So if you take a spelling test, or you're taking a quiz regarding related to some vocabulary words, or you may have a quiz in mathematics, and you're coming home with these high scores, there's still a different interpretation for the overall meaning of these power standards that say, but wait a minute, he is a great speller. No one's saying he's not or she's not a great speller, but in terms of really comparing and contrasting text with similar themes and topics, you're in terms of that higher order of critical thinking skills when it comes to comparing and contrast using Bloom's taxonomy, let's just say, that the child is still lacking really providing much more detailed information that puts that child at a 3 or so. I just think it's quite difficult to have a number placed on it, but
I'm not saying
no, I do agree with you.
Yeah.
I
it's the minus.
I was just going for the 1, 2, 3, 4, not realizing.
Right, exactly. So,
Mrs. Hardeman?
yes.
Also, the movement and the research in grading practices is towards power law, which is a way to calculate the progression of understanding that a student has around a particular standard. And so it's not based on averaging across an entire grading period the results that a student might have had at the beginning of that grading period through the results that student had at the end of the grading period, but however is looking at the progression of learning across that time period and then looking at how proficient that child is in that particular standard at the time that the ratings are being given, so that it's not just If you, at the beginning of the grading period, don't really understand what citing is at the 6th grade level, you might not do well. And so then you carry that low rating forward with you across the entire rating period. The movement now is to looking at the end of the grading period, where that student is in regards to being able to cite accurately from text and draw inference, and then rating them based on how proficient they are at doing that at that point in time, so that it isn't averaging across that entire time period, but looking at that point in time how proficient that student is in that area.
Mr. Lumia.
I'll agree, maybe the averages are necessary, but at the same time, I think what Ms. Pelton said, as a parent, you want to see if it's low rate. I think that's important. So I think the plus, minus, whatever, that should be kept. I agree with you, what I've heard regarding the percentages, I don't think it's appropriate, but so far as plus, minus, and equal, whatever, I think it should be kept. So far, I changed my mind. You know, I listen sometimes.
I also think it's important, as Ms. Cantarini, who's here today, is that the teachers that were on the committee and Janet facilitating this group really took the input of their staff members as well as parents, and that's why this was the result of the recommendation. So this is a recommendation that's reflective of the staff as well as the parents. The parent service.
Any other comments? All right, we're looking now at the consent agenda. Is there anything someone would like to pull from the consent agenda? Wait a minute. Get ready. Okay. Mr. Lumia.
8.06.
8.06. Anything else? Mrs. Hardeman. 8.10.
You were present. So you're good. I'm surprised Mr. Rubin didn't catch that.
Is he on his cell He's got it.
All right, thank you.
Resolved that the Board of Education does hereby approve the following consent agenda items as stated: 8.02, 8.03, 8.04, 8.05, 8.07, 8.08, 8.09, 8.11, 8.12, 8.13, 8.14, 8.15, 8.16, 8.17, 8.18, and 8.19.
So moved.
Second. Mr. Rubin and Mr. Soma. All those in favor? 8-0.
8.06, approval of consultant agreements. Resolved that the Board of Education does hereby authorize the superintendent of schools to sign the following consultant agreements as stated.
So moved.
We have a second? Mr. Rubin moved and Mr. Soma seconded. Right? Mr. Lumia.
I just want to know, I think one of the members of the public had the same concerns. The number of students that are being serviced by the contracts. For example, number 23, we're spending almost $347,000. How many students? Same thing for Anderson School. How many students? I go on and on and on. I mean, it's basically
I'm not sure how much we can disclose about the students.
Not students. Is it one student? Is it 10 students?
I believe it's one student, based on the student's enrollment. It says with an apostrophe S, not after the S, but.
It's the students.
Right, the student's enrollment. So it says apostrophe S,
So we're spending $346,000 on one student. We're spending $397,000 on one another student. $605,000 on another student. God help us. Well, does the Board of Education have any authority to change that? No, correct? These are mandated things. And, you know, it just seemed like that's a lot of money.
A great deal of our budget is mandated costs that we have no control over.
I understand that.
Federal and state laws.
I mean, do we have any control when we send the students to these particular schools? Do we, as a district, go there and see that the services are provided and the progress is measured?
Yes.
I have a motion.
I'm sorry?
We just need to vote on it. All right. All those in favor? Eight to zero.
Civil service is like $371,000.
8.10, approval of minutes, July 7th, board workshop, special board meeting. Resolved that the Board of Education does hereby approve the minutes of the July 7th. I think there's a typo here.
Which one?
2015. I think that's supposed to be board workshop, special board meeting as stated. And I know I was doing this by remote, so I think just the schools that I'm listed for under the adoptive school are a little off. Do you want me to just sit with you afterwards, and is that okay with the rest of the board?
That's
Just
fine.
sit with Alberta and
That's
just
fine.
straighten that out? I know the communication was spotty at best. However, I was glad that I was able to join in.
Right, do we have a motion to adopt them as correct?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's okay. Mr. Rubin, second. Mrs. Pelton. All those in favor? 8-0. We're up to number 9. Old business, approval of the revised Board of Education meeting calendar.
Which is this?
Okay, this is 9.01. All right.
9.01, approval of the revised Board of Education meeting calendar. Whereas the Board of Education approved its meeting calendar at the reorganization meeting of July 7th, 2015. And whereas the Board President has requested that the October 19 meeting be changed to October 26, 2015. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education does hereby approve the revised Board of Education meeting calendar.
Okay. Motion. Mr. Rubin, second. Mr. Sullivan. All those in favor? 8-0.
New business, 10.01, approval of new club charter. Resolved that the Board of Education is hereby approve the new club charter for the Van White Man Club as submitted.
Okay, motion. Mrs. Pelton, second. Mr. Lumia.
You took my job, Tracy.
All those in favor? 8-0.
10.02, approval of the K-6 report card. Resolved that the Board of Education does hereby approve the K-6 report card as stated.
So moved.
Okay, Mr. Rubin, second. Mr. Lumia.
I don't.
All those in favor?
You guys
8-0.
should ask for discussion, please.
Okay, discussion. I thought we discussed that one.
10.03, approval to adopt the code of conduct for the 2015-16 school year. Be it resolved that the that the board hereby adopts the code of conduct for the 2015-16 school year. And be it further resolved that the code of conduct shall be disseminated to all staff, students, and parents, legal guardians, with instructions that the policies and rules therein must be reviewed and adhered to.
Motion, Mr. Rubin, second. Mrs.
I do
Pelton,
have one
discussion.
question.
Yes.
I do have one question.
Yes.
Just a question, not on the content of that, but I'm wondering, would we be compliant if we at least research and took a look and see whether we can disseminate this eventually electronically and get signatures back, from students, parents, whoever has to sign off on in an electronic manner? It would seem that if there's a computer list that has, say, the 100, 200, 500 students this went out to, and every time we get an acknowledgement back, the computer is acknowledging that we don't have to worry anymore. At a certain point, we then say, oh, well, we have these 10, the computer will generate a report and say we have these 10 students, we need to get the report back. I don't know if we can do this electronically or not, but it would be something that I would ask that we maybe look into that.
Any other comments or? I had one. Is it possible, as was suggested in the public hearing, that we include an appendix briefly explaining Pbis? Because a new person coming into the district looking at that acronym would not necessarily know what it is. So just something very brief, just amended, and a little appendix just telling them what it is. Thank you. Is that all right with the rest of you? Do we need to make an amendment?
The motion.
Do we need to amend the motion to include that, Mrs. Pedro? Yes, okay, then I'm making that as an amendment. Does anyone second it?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mr. Rubin. All those in favor of the amendment? 7 opposed, 1. Okay. All right, are there any other amendments or discussion? All right, then the resolution as a whole, do we need to restate it with the new amendment?
As amended, that's all.
I think just 10.03, approval to adopt the code of conduct for the 2015-16 school year as amended. Is that sufficient?
All right, do we need, we already made a motion and seconded, do we need to do it again since we restated? Yes, all right. A motion, please, for that, Mrs. Pelton, and a second, Mr. Rubin. All those in favor? 7. Opposed? Mr. Lumia? Okay. Request for additions to the agenda. Does any board member have a request for additional agenda items? Mr. Rubin?
Thank you, and I wish to, just state that I acknowledge that this has been one heck of a year. Carrying, you've had probably about 1 million things on your plate to juggle all year, plus or minus. Well, I can say that now with the new report card, plus or minus.
One minus.
And I think that you've really done a great job with that. But the board in the past has asked for a monthly status report on Orchard View Alternative High School. And that's something that I think has been missing on this particular meeting. We've asked for it to be at the beginning of the month, I believe. And in light of that, I'm just wondering if it would be possible that you could put an update on the district's webpage by the end of this work week of on the status of Orchard View, what parents can expect, what parents have to do, and just where we are in terms of that whole thing. I would propose in addition that Mr. Carrion put an update on the district's homepage, webpage, on the status of the Orchard View High School, and what students may need to do, what parents may need to do, what the community needs to do at this point, and that be placed by the end of this work.
the problem with that. We haven't approved it yet, so I haven't got to
There's no school.
Well, if it doesn't get seconded, it doesn't go anywhere.
We've had the very last presentation ready to go.
Okay, Mrs. Hardeman seconded.
Okay, so go ahead.
I don't know. Oh, my people have to say yes.
Yes, all right. All those in favor?
This is of adding it to
everybody raise their
the
hand?
discussion.
Right. Adding
Yeah,
to
but
the
yeah,
discussion.
is there a certain?
This is
We're just
just
adding it to
the
the
air.
discussion.
That's fine. That's fine.
8-0 to add it to the discussion. Now we will,
Discuss.
right, to the agenda so that we can now discuss it. Yes.
Well, you already discussed it. He already stated what he wanted.
Mr. Carrion, would
That's
you
right.
like to comment on it?
The presentation, the work that we've done, it's ready to go. We have it. It's been moved from each meeting in the last couple months. So in terms of that, I think really making that presentation and then deciding whether the board still requests a monthly report because the work was done. Therefore, if we can have that presentation and provide you with the work that has been done and show the board and the community what has been done and have the board accept that, I hopefully accept it, and then we can move from there. But if we're gonna highlight one school, then we need to highlight all 15 schools on a monthly basis once this gets approved. So what I'm saying is that I think just maybe tabling a monthly report on Orchard View as making it stand out of the 15 schools, but finishing with that culminating report that we have, and then after that, if there's a monthly report, there should be a monthly report on every school, which I don't recommend that.
I don't think that's not what he wants, I don't think.
Mr. Rubin?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I agree that we don't want it necessarily on every school, but Orchard View has been a hot button topic. It's been something that for close to 2 years now at least, the charter of the school has been questioned. A new charter has been worked on. And there's been a lot of work going into that, a lot of work into reorganization, a lot of work putting into the 9th grade there. How do parents know, number one, should they apply to that? I just want the information out to the public so that they know how to apply, what's to be expected when they get there, so that that everybody is on the same page. And I think this would be just the final presentation.
That's what I'm saying. Well, you had indicated monthly reports.
Well,
so
because that's what the
right.
board had asked for, but when we come to the conclusion of the book, it's over.
You'll have that at the next meeting, and it'll be on the agenda.
Okay.
Personally, I would like to see, the quicker the better. I don't want to wait a week before, the Friday before to see it. I'd like to see it so I can comment on it.
You'll have, which you have received, but you'll have it again,
No, the actual, we have not, I don't think we got the final product. I don't think we have. Have we?
I'll look into it.
Maybe,
but,
have we had the final product? I don't know if we had it. If we had, then I apologize. If we haven't, then I think we should have it in adequate time so that all of us, including people out there, know exactly what's going to entail. I think it's important.
Do we need a motion for this, or, and Mr. Carrion said?
He's a man of his word, that's good enough for me.
Provided, so there's no need
That's
for a
fine.
motion. Yes, Mrs. Hardeman.
Mr. Graham, can you just give us an idea about the timeline as far as implementation of things? I know our next board meeting is not until very close to the end of August.
24th.
So, I'm just concerned about being up against a tight deadline at that point and
You'll have it
clear
in the
about.
weekend review on Friday.
But I mean, as far
Off the
as
top
the
of
things
my
being
head, I-
implemented at Orchard View and parents and students and information that they will need before the start of the school year.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But off the top of my head right now. No, can't do, I can't.
Okay, so you can give us a timeline.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I Are there any other additions to the agenda? All right. Then this is the time for additional comments from the public. Again, please limit your time at the mic to 3 minutes and state your name and town. Thank you.
Do you know where I live yet?
I want to find out.
Please, I know, and I know your
I know.
names, but it's being live streamed to the public, and it helps them. And
So
it
they can
also
laugh
helps
at home.
Mrs. Pedro with the minutes. Thank you.
Maureen Ryan, East Fishkill. I'm listening to the debate on Orchard View, and I think you're missing the issue here. The issue is the public is not aware as to what's going on. Amongst the group, you might know, but it's the public that doesn't know what's going on. That's the problem. You know, it was the same thing with the redistricting. The public doesn't know what's going on. That's what the public wants. They want that update. And I think everybody, it sounded to me like you were totally missing out on that.
No, I
The public needs to know.
agree.
They need the updates. And there's no Orchard View parents here. So what do? I know I'd be going like a mad woman. I'm still waiting for the letter for the teacher this year, so I can go get my school supplies. I can only imagine what those families are going through. So when you're talking, you gotta think of the public that's not sitting in on these little meetings. They are the ones that need to know and are not getting the information.
We have to know too.
So that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Is there anyone else?
Come on, Ed.
I never usually speak up at this. I'm Keith Gullery, Town of Officers. I've also been a district employee for 33 years, so in September, and I'm also a volunteer for going on 38 years in the Hackensack. As a member of the New Hackensack Fire Department, and also as a representative for New Hamburg, since nobody's here tonight, we'd like to very much appreciate and thank you, the board and everybody, for donating these school buses, especially in light of what happened this past spring. It will give us a lot of interest and training and knowledge of these large vehicles and stuff like that. I mean, I've been around for 33 years, but there's a lot of stuff that people don't know about. And we really, really appreciate this. I started this with Mr. Whitaker about a year ago. And I was hoping we can maybe, you know, I know you guys usually auction them off, get money for them. But sometimes in life, something happens, or like I said, we're trading with cars and stuff like that. We don't get something this large, and this will very, very benefit the volunteerism and help the community out. God forbid anything like this happens again, we'll have training on it. Okay, so again, thank you very much for approving this. We appreciate it.
And thank you for working for us for so long.
And thank you for your service as a volunteer firefighter. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
From all of us.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
I was hoping you disappoint me, Mr. I know better.
Ed Slowshower, Town of East Fishkill. Summer school. Can someone explain to me the summer school program? It's 20 days over a 4-week period, 1 hour for each class. We allow 3 absences for this. I always thought if you failed a class, you repeat or at least cover the material of that failed class in summer school. What are the Commissioner of Education requirements as stated in the policy manual? I'm not sure because it's blank, and it was posted September 20th, 1994. Let's take a look at the district's homework policy, also established September 20th, 1994. It's over 20 years old. Let's assume that homework is given 4 nights a week, not 5. Assigned an average of, K through 2, 1 hour a week of homework. That's 15 minutes a day. Grades 3 to 4 is an hour and a half. That's 22.5 minutes a day. Grades 5 through 6 are 2 hours of homework a week. That's 30 minutes a day. 15 or 20 minutes of reading is included in the homework assignment in some grades. So I ask you, how does a student, especially in grades 2 through 6, get any type of reinforcement of what they've learned that day in class when there is no real homework? Worksheets and handouts printed off the internet is not homework. Is the homework going home that night based on the classwork that was worked on for the day? What has happened to homework based on all subject matter? Math, writing, spelling, vocabulary, science, social studies, language, etc. How are we looking at homework assignments throughout the district by grades, especially in the lower grades? Has anyone bothered to discuss this? Does anyone think this is one of the major reasons why we are struggling as a district? So let's take a look at our proficiency test scores again for the last 2 years real quick for grades 6 and 7. Grade 6 ELA for 2013 is 32%, state average is 30. 2014 is 26%, state average is 28%. Math in 2013, 23%, state average 30%. 2014, 31%, state average 37%. Grade 7 ELA, 2013, 39%, state average 31%. 2014, 33%, state average 28%. Math in 13, 24%, state average 27%. 2014, 30%, state average 32%. In my opinion, these students are having difficulty understanding the material. One reason is, obviously, from the material in the Common Core tests itself. The other, and here's a very important reason, I believe these students, to me, don't appear to be able to read or write at grade level. They're handicapped because they cannot comprehend material that they are reading on these state exams or even in the classroom. Have we looked at this as a possible reason why students are performing so poorly? We are not even meeting the state average, which the state average is extremely low to begin with, and is not anything to feel proud about as a state. And in some cases, we're just barely above. So why is mediocre acceptable to this district? When do we identify the real problems, discuss them, and work together to fix them so we're giving our kids a chance to be successful in life? Thank you.
Any other comments? Could I have a motion to adjourn? All in favor? 8-0.
Tracy, if you had a son on board, that would have been, I would be dropping a second.
John, wait, on the bottom. In board docs, on the bottom of that sheet is the breakdown of the school's student. So it's one student, 206. They must have a serious handicap. Oh, I also want to know, is anything Medicaid reimbursed?
You came to that list I gave to the superintendent.
At the bottom